Why didn't I ever think about fighting back in any of the nightmares I've had over the years? I think I just screamed and ran and tripped over something, and I just ended up dying anyways. That twisted little thought brings us to our 1987 treasure, Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3, Dream Warriors, directed by Mr. Chuck Russell. Let's go ahead and talk about it. I really dug the opening of this movie. You know, it was very foreboding, sort of creepy music. You've got a lot of odd utensils being used that you wouldn't think would accompany a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. We've got paper mache, we've got Diet Coke, we've got coffee grounds, and eventually we get a great Into the Fire by Dokken to close out the opening credits and show us that our new foil is making a paper mache 1428 Elm Street house. And just a quick side note, I love the fact that the filmmakers keep up the continuity of that house. It doesn't really change. Bars on windows, no bars on windows, that's about the extent of it. Everything else is usually pretty spot on, even down to the version they use in Freddy vs. Jason. And then we meet the gorgeous Patricia Arquette, who plays Kristen Parker, who would presumably be our new final girl. Now, Kristen's got a unique ability where she can actually bring other people into her dreams as well as her nightmares. That would appear to be something that would come in handy in this film, but we'll get to that eventually. Now, just like with any film in this franchise, we start off in the middle of Kristen's nightmare. And though she doesn't die, she sustains some pretty serious lacerations to her wrists. Her mother views that as a suicide attempt, thus she decides to commit her to Weston Hills, which is a psychiatric hospital for children. There we meet the staff, who would serve as primarily the antagonists in this film when Freddy's not around. And we see the facility itself, which is the backdrop for the rest of the movie. But the best part, when Kristen is trying to ward off the doctors from sedating her, she's got a scalpel, she's letting them know she's not going to get put back to sleep. We get the glorious return of Heather Langenkamp as Nancy Thompson. She finishes the nursery rhyme that Kristen's repeating over and over again.
Never sleep again.
She asks her how she knows it. She takes away the scalpel and she gives her a very warm and what looked to be needed hug at the time. And we have our final girl back. So one of the hooks of this movie for me has always been the cast. The cast here is awesome. A lot of them are 80s mainstays. You've got Lawrence Fishburne in an early role playing an orderly. There's no weak links across the board. Everything feels bigger in this movie. Robert Englund, we don't even have to talk about Robert Englund when we talk about the cast because he knocks that out of the park no matter what he's given to do. There's some bad movies in this franchise. There's only a couple, but even in the bad movies, Robert Englund shows up to play. The dreams feel bigger. The nightmares feel bigger. Everything feels so much more mature in this movie than it did in the last two. How hopeless did it feel when the kids were sleeping in shifts and watching out for one another and arguing over who was going to get to sleep that night and who wasn't going to be able to sleep that night? It just makes you feel so desperate for these teenagers. I mean, they're just children. Freddy in this movie is at his most sinister. He finds these kids' weaknesses, he torments them with it. Ultimately, he ends up killing 2 kids brutally, and those deaths force these kids to sort of band together. And it also forces Nancy to try to talk Neil into the idea of using Hypnosil, which is a dream suppressant. The idea of a drug that can stop you from dreaming in this setting and with these circumstances, really, really cool. I mean, I dug that. Now, it's shortly after the welcome to primetime death in the TV room.
This picture, your big breaking TV. What's the prime time?
That Nancy decides to sit down with the kids in group and explain that she actually knows who's after them. Naturally, they're kids listening to an adult talk to them. Their ears are turned off. They don't want to hear it until she starts making sense and describing this person to them. Nobody can believe it's the same person. Nobody knows why he's after him, and then Nancy gives them the last of the Elm Street speech. This speech was tremendous in this movie. This speech is a lot like Paul's campfire story about Jason Voorhees from part 2. Nancy decides to share with the group that Kristen has the ability to bring people into her dreams, which is something Kristen did with Nancy after she was attacked by Freddy the Earthworm this last time. That's when the kids start to realize they can do different things in their dreams. They can be whoever they want in their dreams. See, I don't know if gymnastics would really factor into any of my dreams. If I had the ability to be anything I wanted, I'd probably choose like Terminator perhaps, especially if I'm going toe-to-toe with Freddy Krueger, or at the very least Brock Lesnar.
Get a life, kid.
In the midst of this speech, Joey runs off with a nurse that everybody's got their eyes on, and she starts seducing him, and we get our gratuitous nudity of the movie. But we soon find out that that's not the nurse. That's Freddy Krueger, and Joey's asleep, and Joey is in deep, deep trouble now. So the race to save Joey is on. The climax of this movie is so strong. It's so much better than what we got out of part 1 and part 2. Now, those movies are great horror movies, and I can't really take anything away from them. I just wish it had left us with a little bit more at the end, and we get that in spades here, because we get the return of John Saxon as Nancy's dad. He plays a pivotal role in what happens at the end. We have this awesome bond that has developed between Nancy and Kristen. I mean, they're making their way down into this grand boiler room to try to save Joey from Freddy's clutches, and they're holding hands, and just other Kincaids with them. So we do have a little bit of a team up against Freddy for the first time, and they have some success, but ultimately it's Freddy's world, and what happens eventually happens. Now, we won't give anything away. We try never to spoil anything. We learn about Freddy's mother, which was an unusual twist. It was nice because it added something for the next movies to build off of. I always think that's a great touch. I hate when they completely slam the door and then the next guy that's got to take the helm, he has nothing to work with. They did that a lot with the Halloween franchise. Joey gets his big hero moment at the end of the movie, and it popped me as a kid. I was super into it. He was a mute. He hadn't talked the whole movie. Couldn't cry out for help when Freddy took him. And once all of his friends are in the clutches of the several Freddys that we have in this hallway of mirrors, Joey stands up, screams, presumably bursts out Freddy's eardrums, saves his friends. Really cool moment. This movie ages gracefully. I give it an 8 out of 10. It's right on par with the first one. In some cases, I'll prefer to watch this one over the original. A lot like with the Friday the 13th series, man. They did not miss with these first few films. I mean, they stumble later on, but yeah, this one was solid.
Oh my God.
This is Aging Gracefully. I am Matthew Essex. I will see you all on the other side.